Imagine the roar of the crowd, the scent of dust and sweat, the gleam of steel under the Roman sun. Thousands of spectators packed the Colosseum, the Circus Maximus, or smaller amphitheaters across the empire, eyes glued to the spectacle unfolding before them. Gladiators, men and sometimes women trained to fight, became both entertainment and symbols of courage, skill, death-defying audacity and, if the propaganda was working, the glory of Rome itself. Today, when we picture gladiators, we often see heroic figures in bronze armor, muscles gleaming, battling for honor and survival, their every swing captured in slow-motion cinematic drama. But how much of this image is reality, and how much is myth? Gladiators occupy a peculiar place in history. They are simultaneously mythologized and well-documented, celebrated and feared, iconic and obscure. Their lives were brutal, regulated, and often short. Unlike Hollywood's portrayals, most gladiators were slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals, trained to fight for survival rather than personal glory. And yet, some rose to fame, commanding crowds, earning wealth, and achieving a kind of celebrity that rivaled the most prominent politicians of their day. The truth is more complicated and far more fascinating than the cinematic narratives we consume today. Why do we continue to be obsessed with gladiators? Part of it is the raw drama. Life and death combat is inherently compelling. People have always been drawn to spectacle, whether in ancient arenas, medieval jousts, or modern sports. But the allure of gladiators is not just the violence, it is the ritualized combination of skill, courage, and showmanship. Each fight was choreographed within a framework of rules and tradition. Gladiators were athletes, warriors, and performers rolled into one, a combination that is irresistible to the imagination. There is also a cultural fascination with the idea of the heroic outsider. Many gladiators were outsiders, thrust into the arena against their will, yet some of them found ways to assert skill, intelligence, and even personality. Their story is appealing because it mirrors one of the most enduring human narratives, confronting impossible odds, defying death, and achieving recognition against the system. Spartacus, the most famous gladiator of all, embodies this narrative perfectly, rising from a Thracian prisoner to leader of a massive slave revolt. He challenges the stereotype of the obedient, defeated gladiator. His story blends strategy, courage, and tragedy in a way that resonates with us even to millennia later. Yet myths abound. The idea that gladiators always fought to the death is overstated. Most bouts ended when one fighter was incapacitated or surrendered. Complete death was rare and would have been economically wasteful to the owner of the gladiator. Gladiators were expensive investments, trained at schools known as ludi, and maintaining their health was a practical concern. Nevertheless, the myth of inevitable death persists, partly because it heightens drama, and partly because Roman writers and historians themselves sometimes exaggerated for effect. Gladiators also embody a paradox. They were both slaves and celebrities, victims and heroes. Some, especially those who excelled in the arena, could earn fame, gifts, and even freedom. Successful gladiators inspired fan clubs, endorsements, yes, ancient sponsorships, and admiration from citizens of all classes. Their image chiseled, disciplined, deadly captured the Roman imagination and continues to capture ours. They were the original sports stars, complete with the complex social dynamics of fame, adoration, envy, and exploitation. The arena itself was more than a venue for violence. It was a microcosm of Roman society, politics, and ideology. Public games were tools of propaganda, a demonstration of imperial power, control over life and death, and reinforcement of societal norms. Emperors staged lavish spectacles to curry favor with the populace, distract from political unrest, and showcase Rome's wealth and organizational skill. The gladiator, in essence, was both an instrument and a symbol. His performance reinforced the state's narrative while thrilling the audience. But let's not forget the human element. Beneath the armor and the choreography were men and women who trained, endured pain, and faced mortality daily. Their lives were shaped by fear, camaraderie, ambition, and resilience. Behind the spectacle was constant discipline, long hours of training, strict diets, brutal punishments for disobedience, and the ever-present possibility of death. Modern depictions often sanitize this reality. Understanding it makes the stories of individual gladiators even more remarkable. It's also worth considering the social dimension of gladiatorial games. The crowd was not merely passive. Spectators influenced outcomes through shouts, gestures, and public opinion. Life and death could hinge on collective judgment. This interplay of performer and audience created an intense dynamic. Gladiators had to master not only weapons and tactics, but also psychological perception. They were performers in every sense, balancing skill, courage, and audience expectation. The fascination continues today because gladiators represent extremes of courage, endurance, and human ingenuity under duress. They are the archetype of the warrior performer, embodying drama and tension that transcends time. Whether in history books, movies, or video games, they offer a lens through which we explore heroism, mortality, and society itself. In this series, we will peel back the myths and look at the real lives of gladiators. We will explore the origins of the games, the social structures of training schools, the various classes of fighters, and the brutal reality of the arena. We'll meet individual gladiators, dissect their strategies and skills, and understand how the spectacle reflected and reinforced Roman society. And yes, we'll have a bit of fun along the way, because irony and vivid comparisons make these ancient warriors more relatable and their stories more alive than any dry academic lecture could. By the end of this chapter, and indeed this series, you'll understand why gladiators continue to fascinate. They were more than blood sport entertainers. They were disciplined athletes, social phenomena, and enduring symbols of courage, strategy, and resilience. Their myths persist because they condense human aspiration, fear, and audacity into a single, unforgettable image. But the truth is richer, messier, and ultimately more compelling than any myth. And it's that truth, the lives, struggles, victories, and defeats of real gladiators that will take center stage in our journey through the world of ancient Rome's most iconic fighters. Before we marvel at the might of gladiators in the arena, we need to understand where they came from, both socially and historically. The concept of a gladiator did not emerge overnight. It evolved over centuries, shaped by Rome's expansion, military culture, and social hierarchies. To understand gladiators, we must first understand Rome itself, a society obsessed with power, spectacle, and the demonstration of dominance over both nature and people. The earliest known gladiatorial combat in Rome dates back to 264 BCE. During a funeral ceremony, it was said that 3 pairs of men fought to the death to honor a nobleman, a ritual intended to appease the spirits of the dead. What began as a religious custom gradually transformed into public entertainment. Over time, the fights moved from funeral rites to permanent venues, and then to purpose-built arenas, culminating in the construction of iconic structures like the Colosseum, where tens of thousands of spectators could witness blood and spectacle simultaneously. Gladiators were initially drawn from the lowest strata of society: slaves, prisoners of war, and condemned criminals. For them, the arena offered a grim alternative to execution. Life as a gladiator was harsh, but it also came with potential rewards: fame, patronage, and occasionally freedom. Unlike typical slaves, gladiators had access to medical care, specialized diets, and intensive physical training, because their survival and performance represented an economic and social investment for their owners or trainers. Not all gladiators were coerced. Some free men, drawn by opportunity, joined voluntarily. They were the equivalent of modern professional athletes, seeking money, fame, or a taste of adventure. These volunteers were often called opteroti, and they signed contracts binding them 2 years of training and service. Their motivations were diverse. Some sought escape from debt, others wanted social mobility, and a few craved the adrenaline and spectacle of combat. Regardless of origin, all gladiators shared a life defined by discipline, danger, and the constant proximity of death. Rome's military conquests played a crucial role in feeding the gladiatorial system. Captured soldiers, often from Gaul, Thrace, and Numidia, became the backbone of gladiator schools. Their previous combat experience made them ideal candidates for training in specialized fighting styles. For example, the Threx class mimicked Thracian soldiers with small shields and curved swords, while the Murmillo represented heavily armored legionaries, providing audiences with a stylized reenactment of Rome's enemies. The spectacle thus served a dual purpose: entertainment and reinforcement of Rome's dominance over conquered peoples. The social dynamics surrounding gladiators were complex. On one hand, they were marginalized, enslaved, and often despised by the elite for their lowly origins. On the other hand, they were celebrated and admired, even by citizens of high rank, for their skill, bravery, and endurance. This duality created a unique cultural space. Gladiators were both symbols of subjugation and icons of personal excellence. The paradox of admiration for those who were socially inferior yet physically superior made gladiators figures of fascination and envy alike. Training schools, or ludi, formalized the path from raw recruit to seasoned combatant. These institutions were often owned by wealthy entrepreneurs called lanistae, who profited from the performance and, when possible, sale of successful gladiators. Training was rigorous and systematic. Recruits underwent diet regulation, physical conditioning, mock combat, and tactical instruction. Discipline was brutal. Infractions were punished severely, and only the most dedicated or talented individuals survived to fight in the arena. Success in the ludi could transform a nameless slave into a celebrated figure, with fame extending across the empire. Rome's appetite for spectacle was insatiable. Gladiatorial games were not confined to the capital. They spread throughout the empire, appearing in towns and provinces. The games became a political tool as well. Emperors and politicians used gladiators to curry favor with the populace, demonstrating generosity, wealth, and control. Sponsoring games was a way to display power, distract citizens from political strife, and reinforce social hierarchies. Gladiators were both instruments and symbols of these ambitions, embodying the might, discipline, and reach of Rome. Despite the apparent glamour, life for gladiators was precarious. Disease, injury, and psychological stress were constant companions. Medical knowledge in ludi was advanced for its time, with physicians specializing in treating wounds, broken bones, and infections. But nothing could eliminate the risks of combat. The intense physical and mental demands created a form of professional resilience that contributed to the mystique surrounding these fighters. They were trained to endure pain, manage fear, and perform under pressure, a combination of skill, courage, and showmanship that enthralled audiences. Notably, gladiators also shaped social interactions and cultural narratives. Their exploits were recorded by historians, celebrated in poetry, and depicted in frescoes and mosaics. Success in the arena conferred not only fame, but also the potential for patronage, gifts, and even manumission freedom granted for exceptional service. These narratives reinforced Roman values, courage, endurance, skill, and loyalty. Gladiators became living embodiments of the ideals Rome sought to project, even as they remained socially marginalized. One cannot overlook the psychological aspect of their fame. Audiences projected hopes, fears, and values onto the combatants. Citizens cheered not just for survival or victory, but for symbolic triumphs, the righteous overcoming the unruly, skill defeating brute force, human courage transcending social constraint. Gladiators, often nameless and enslaved, thus carried symbolic weight far beyond their individual performances. Their arena fights were microcosms of broader societal narratives, reflecting tensions, aspirations, and values of Roman life. By the time of the early empire, gladiators had evolved from ritual combatants into celebrities. Names were recorded, fan clubs existed, and exceptional fighters commanded attention, similar to modern sports icons. Their origin stories, from captured soldiers and slaves to famed arena stars, highlight a dynamic tension between oppression and opportunity, mortality and fame, labor and entertainment. The evolution from coerced combatant to admired figure underscores the complexity of Roman society and the enduring allure of the gladiator archetype. In conclusion, the origins of gladiators reveal a blend of practicality, spectacle, and social engineering. They were products of Rome's military expansion, economic structures, and appetite for entertainment. Yet within these constraints emerged individuals whose skill, courage, and charisma could defy circumstance, capture public imagination, and achieve a form of immortality. The journey from slave or prisoner to arena star, however rare, embodies a narrative of resilience and adaptability that resonates across time. As we proceed through this series, we will explore not just where gladiators came from, but what it meant to live, train, and fight as one. We will uncover the realities behind their fame, dissect the myths, and illuminate the complex social, cultural, and political roles they played in one of history's most extraordinary civilizations. From the shadows of captivity to the spotlight of the arena, the story of gladiators is a story of survival, spectacle, and human ambition, a story as compelling today as it was 2,000 years ago. If you close your eyes and imagine a gladiator, chances are you see a man with a sword raised, muscles tensed, armor gleaming under the Roman sun. But that image only scratches the surface. Gladiators were not generic fighters, they were specialized athletes, each trained for a particular combat style, wielding specific weapons and wearing tailored armor. Understanding their equipment and fighting techniques is essential to grasp both the spectacle and strategy of the arena. Roman gladiators were divided into distinct classes, each with a recognizable combination of weapons, armor, and tactics. These classes were not arbitrary, they reflected a balance of offense, defense, agility, and spectacle. The variety ensured that battles remained engaging for spectators, while also showcasing different forms of combat skill. Perhaps the most famous class was the Murmillo, recognizable by their large rectangular shields scutum, heavy helmets, and short swords gladius. They were the heavyweights of the arena, designed to overwhelm opponents with strength and endurance, slowly advancing like living battering rams. In contrast, The Retiarius relied on speed and cunning, armed with a trident, a weighted net, and a dagger. This lightly armored fighter excelled in agility, attempting to entangle, disarm, or outmaneuver the opponent. The Retiarius was the classic trickster, dancing around the more heavily armored Mamilo, luring him into mistakes. Their battles were like chess matches on the sands of the arena. One player a slow, powerful force, the other swift, elusive, and calculating. Other classes added further variety. The Threx carried a small, rectangular shield, and a curved sword called a Seeker, simulating Thracian warriors conquered by Rome. The Secutor was heavily armored, with a smooth helmet designed to prevent entanglement with a Retiarius net, making them a direct counter to tricksters. There were also specialized fighters, like the Hoplomachus, inspired by Greek hoplites, wielding spear and small shield, emphasizing discipline and formation-like tactics. Each class had its own training regimen, strategy, and rhythm, ensuring that no two fights were exactly alike. Armor was both protective and symbolic. Helmets were often elaborately designed, with crests, visors, and decorations reflecting the fighter's class or origin. Heavy armor protected vital areas, but slowed the wearer, emphasizing strength over speed. Lightly armored fighters relied on evasion, using minimal protection to maximize mobility. Armor was also a visual cue for the audience, helping spectators instantly recognize the type of gladiator and anticipate the style of combat they were about to witness. Weapons, too, were specialized. The Gladius short, double-edged sword was effective for close combat, allowing thrusts and quick slashes. Tridents could be used to control distance, entangle opponents, or deliver lethal thrusts. Daggers provided a backup, while nets allowed strategic immobilization. These tools required extensive training. Wielding them effectively demanded strength, precision, and the ability to read the opponent's intentions in split seconds. In essence, gladiators were living weapons, each movement honed for maximum efficiency and spectacle. The arena was a stage, and combat styles were as much about drama as practicality. Matches were carefully planned to showcase contrast. A slow, armored Murmillo versus a nimble Retiarius created tension, excitement, and unpredictability. Spectators watched patterns, anticipating tactics, celebrating clever maneuvers, and groaning at mistakes. The diversity of fighting styles transformed the arena into a theater of strategy, athleticism, and spectacle, where every match told a story of skill, courage, and improvisation. Training for these roles was rigorous. Each gladiator spent hours perfecting his weapon technique, footwork, and defensive maneuvers. Mock battles, sparring drills, and tactical exercises simulated the conditions of the arena. Trainers assessed not only physical ability, but also psychological resilience. Could a fighter stay calm under pressure? Could he execute a complex maneuver while fatigued? Success in combat depended on mastering these subtleties. Mechanical skill alone was not enough. The interplay of offense and defense was central to gladiatorial strategy. Heavy fighters relied on controlled aggression, methodically wearing down opponents. Light fighters depended on timing, misdirection, and patience, often baiting heavier opponents into errors. Some fighters specialized in disarming techniques, while others mastered throws, trips, and sweeps. Each class had counter strategies. The careful observer could predict likely maneuvers, though execution required split-second timing and adaptability. Beyond individual combat, gladiators sometimes engaged in group battles or staged reenactments of historical conflicts. These spectacles required coordination, communication, and adherence to choreographed sequences, blending martial skill with performative timing. Even in staged combats, the line between rehearsal and genuine danger was thin. Injuries were common, and mistakes could be fatal. The ability to blend artistry with lethal effectiveness defined the truly exceptional gladiators. Weapons and armor were also status symbols within the gladiatorial hierarchy. Exceptional craftsmanship, ornate helmets, and specialized weaponry could enhance a fighter's reputation, signaling skill and prestige. Spectators responded to these cues, celebrating recognizable warriors and anticipating signature moves. Gladiators thus became both athletes and performers, their identity inseparable from the tools and armor they wielded. The variety of styles reflected both practical and cultural influences. Roman society drew inspiration from conquered peoples, military traditions, and theatrical conventions. Gladiators represented not only the might of Rome, but also a visual narrative of history and conquest. Each class evoked distant lands, ancient enemies, and martial archetypes, turning the arena into a living mosaic of history, strategy, and spectacle. Finally, the combination of weapons, armor, and fighting styles created a dynamic ecosystem of combat. The interplay between classes, the balance of strength and agility, and the tension between offense and defense transformed each match into a story unfolding in real time. For spectators, it was entertainment. For gladiators, survival, and for historians, a window into Roman culture, military strategy, and social psychology. Understanding the tools and techniques of gladiators is essential to appreciating the complexity of their world. They were more than fighters, they were trained specialists, performers, and symbols of Rome's ideals and contradictions. The sword, shield, net, and helmet were extensions of their skill, courage, and identity. In the arena, these tools combined with human ingenuity and bravery to create spectacles that still captivate us today. If you thought gladiators simply woke up, grabbed a sword, and strode into the arena, think again. The journey from a novice fighter to a seasoned gladiator was long, grueling, and often brutal, beginning in the ludi, the specialized training schools where men and occasionally women were forged into the lethal athletes of Rome. These schools were the crucibles of Roman spectacle, where discipline, endurance, and survival instincts were honed to razor-sharp precision. Ludi were not merely gyms, they were highly organized institutions, run by trainers known as lanistae. These men were entrepreneurs, managers, and often former fighters themselves. A lanista's primary goal was economic, to train fighters who could survive and perform spectacularly in the arena, ensuring profit from victories, wages, or eventual sale of skilled gladiators. The schools themselves were more like militarized academies than recreational facilities. Every action, every meal, and every movement was structured to enhance combat readiness. The physical regimen was intense. Gladiators trained daily, often multiple times a day, following routines that would challenge even modern professional athletes. Morning drills included running, stretching, and calisthenics to build endurance, flexibility, and agility. Weight training involved lifting stones, sandbags, or wooden implements to strengthen muscles essential for combat. Sparring with wooden swords, rudis allowed students to practice techniques without excessive risk of injury, gradually progressing to metal blades under close supervision. But physical training was only one aspect of the curriculum. Discipline was absolute. Ludi were hierarchical, with strict chains of command. Trainers demanded obedience, attention to detail, and punctuality. Missteps were punished, sometimes brutally, to instill respect for authority and the harsh realities of combat. Gladiators learned quickly that hesitation, disobedience, or carelessness could result in injury, demotion, or public humiliation. Every correction, every drill, reinforced the notion that survival depended not only on skill, but also on mental fortitude and adherence to rules. Combat drills were sophisticated and methodical. Fighters practiced maneuvers, counters, and strategies tailored to their class Mamilo, Retiarius, Frex, or others. Trainers emphasized reading an opponent's movements, timing attacks, and conserving energy for the crucial moments of battle. Mock battles simulated arena conditions, including crowd noise, surprise attacks, and psychological stress. The goal was to create fighters who could think, adapt, and execute under extreme pressure, where a single mistake could mean death. Diet was integral to training. Gladiators consumed high-protein, high-calorie meals designed to maintain muscle mass, endurance, and overall health. Historical evidence points to a grain-heavy diet supplemented with legumes, vegetables, and occasional meat. Drinks enriched with calcium and minerals helped strengthen bones, particularly for heavy fighters like Murmillos. Trainers closely monitored nutrition, understanding that a weakened body could compromise performance, investment, and profit. Medical care was advanced for its time. Gladiators were valuable commodities, and injuries had financial consequences. Physicians within the Ludi treated wounds, fractures, and infections, ensuring fighters could return to training in the arena. This system of care was pragmatic rather than compassionate. Survival was encouraged not out of kindness, but because a well-conditioned gladiator was a profitable one. The paradox of nurturing life to prepare for death was a defining characteristic of these schools. Mental conditioning was equally rigorous. Trainers sought to cultivate courage, focus, and resilience. Gladiators faced constant reminders of mortality and the consequences of failure. Psychological drills, controlled exposure to stress, and close supervision prepared them for the intensity of public combat. Fighters learned to manage fear, control adrenaline, and maintain composure, essential traits when facing an opponent wielding lethal weapons in front of thousands of spectators. The social environment within Ludi was complex. Trainees lived in communal quarters, sharing space, meals, and routines. Bonds formed quickly, sometimes evolving into friendships, rivalries, or mentorships. Trust and cooperation were necessary for sparring and team-based exercises, but competition and the constant threat of injury created tension. Gladiators were simultaneously comrades and competitors, balancing collaboration with the personal imperative of survival and advancement. Punishments were harsh, reflecting the brutal logic of the system. Infractions ranged from extra drills to flogging or confinement. Discipline was not arbitrary. It served to reinforce habits, obedience, and the relentless focus required for survival. Physical punishment, though severe, was paired with rewards for excellence. Exceptional trainees could earn privileges, better equipment, or even early recognition in arena matches. This system of carrot and stick created highly motivated and resilient fighters. Specialized instruction varied according to class and fighting style. Murmillos trained for strength, endurance, and direct attacks, while Ritieri emphasized agility, evasion, and tactical cunning. Trainers understood the interplay of styles, ensuring each gladiator could counter or exploit weaknesses in opponents. This knowledge extended to multi-combat scenarios, team formations, and choreographed reenactments of historical battles. Fighters were not mere brawlers, they were strategic athletes, combining physical skill with mental acuity. The psychological impact of training cannot be overstated. Gladiators learned to accept and even embrace danger, to perform under extreme stress, and to control fear. These skills were crucial not only in combat, but also in maintaining morale and confidence. Success in the arena depended on preparation, instinct, and the ability to read both the opponent and the environment. Ludi transformed raw recruits into performers capable of captivating audiences and surviving deadly encounters. Despite the rigors, life in the Ludi was not devoid of community and ritual. Daily routines, shared meals, and collective training created a sense of identity and cohesion among fighters. Ceremonies, rituals, and even small competitions fostered camaraderie, motivation, and hierarchy. Gladiators were part of a structured world where survival depended on discipline, skill, and social navigation as much as physical prowess. Finally, the Ludi represent the essence of the gladiatorial system, a blend of discipline, brutality, and spectacle. They were arenas of preparation, where life and death were abstract concepts, until the final performance in the public amphitheater. Here, ordinary men and occasionally women were transformed into legendary figures, combining athleticism, strategy, and performative skill into a form of living art. The Ludi were crucibles in which raw potential was forged into deadly precision, a testament to the intensity, ingenuity, and endurance that define the life of a gladiator. In essence, training schools were the hidden heart of gladiatorial culture. Without them, there would be no spectacle, no heroes, no legends to thrill the crowds or inspire centuries of fascination. The brutal discipline, rigorous training, and unrelenting demand for excellence created fighters capable of performing extraordinary feats under the most extreme conditions. They were athletes, performers, and warriors rolled into one, living proof that the line between life and death could be traversed not by luck, but by relentless preparation, courage, and skill. When we think of gladiators, one name inevitably rises above the rest: Spartacus. Yet he is just the tip of the iceberg in a world filled with remarkable fighters, each with their own story, skill, and drama. Understanding famous gladiators requires delving into their origins, their rise in the arena, and the ways their lives intertwined with politics, spectacle, and society at large. Spartacus, a Thracian by birth, was captured and enslaved by Rome, forced into the life of a gladiator. His story is extraordinary, only because of his combat prowess, but because of his audacity to challenge the entire Roman system. Trained in the brutal Ludi, Spartacus quickly distinguished himself for skill, intelligence, and leadership. While many gladiators were confined to the arena, Spartacus' ambitions extended beyond the sands, culminating in the largest slave revolt in Roman history. He led tens of thousands of escaped slaves and gladiators across the Italian peninsula, defeating multiple Roman armies before ultimately being cornered and killed. His life illustrates the dual reality of gladiators: survival and rebellion, skill and social constraint, performance and history-making. Spartacus was not alone in achieving fame. Other gladiators gained recognition through extraordinary skill, charisma, or sheer audacity. One such figure was Flamma, a Syrian-born gladiator whose real name was recorded on inscriptions and epitaphs. Flamma fought in more than 30 matches, surviving to earn freedom 4 times. Yet he chose to remain in the arena, pursuing fame, glory, and the thrill of combat. His story demonstrates the complex motivations that drove gladiators: money, survival, prestige, and sometimes sheer personal satisfaction. There were also female gladiators, or gladiatresses, though far rarer. Historical records and inscriptions hint at women who trained and fought, sometimes in public spectacles alongside male gladiators. Their existence challenges assumptions about gender roles in ancient Rome and adds another layer to the mythology of gladiatorial combat. Female fighters were celebrated for bravery, skill, and novelty, and while their numbers were limited, their stories survive as testament to the diversity and spectacle of the games. The fame of gladiators extended beyond the arena. Inscriptions, mosaics, and writings from Roman historians show that celebrated fighters enjoyed a form of celebrity status. Fans followed their victories, and emperors occasionally took personal interest, offering gifts, preferential treatment, or political alliances. A successful gladiator could become a symbol of courage, skill, and loyalty, inspiring admiration from common citizens and elites alike. In a society obsessed with hierarchy and status, these fighters occupied a unique space, marginalized in social origin, but elevated in cultural and public esteem. Fighting style, class, and personality all contributed to fame. Aretiarius, who outmaneuvered a Murmillo with ingenuity, would be celebrated for cleverness. A Murmillo, who dominated with strength and discipline, could be hailed for courage. Spectacle was central. Audiences loved drama, tension, and contrast. Gladiators who could captivate crowds with skill, bravado, and flair were remembered long after their deaths, their names etched into inscriptions and the annals of Roman history. The life of a famous gladiator was a delicate balance. Success brought recognition, yet it also increased danger. Prominent fighters were expected to face tougher opponents and take on riskier battles to satisfy the audience and maintain their status. Fame could make a gladiator a target, both inside the arena and outside, as rivals sought to prove themselves or challenge established hierarchies. This pressure demanded not only physical skill, but psychological resilience, strategic thinking, and adaptability. Stories of gladiators also intersect with political history. During the late Republic and early Empire, games were often used to curry favor with the populace or distract from unrest. Celebrities like Spartacus, Flamma, or rarely documented female gladiators became pawns, symbols, and sometimes political tools. Their performances reinforced imperial narratives, entertained citizens, and provided spectacle to maintain social order. In a sense, famous gladiators were both agents and instruments of power, navigating a world that could elevate or destroy them with a single event. Beyond historical records, myths and legends amplified their fame. Writers like Plutarch, Appian, and later chroniclers dramatized battles, often emphasizing heroism, cunning, or tragedy. Over centuries, these stories evolved, blending fact with narrative flair. Modern adaptations, films, books, and television series continue this tradition, cementing figures like Spartacus in global consciousness. Yet the historical reality, often harsher and more nuanced, offers even richer insights into strategy, courage, and survival under extreme conditions. The personal lives of famous gladiators were equally compelling. Bonds with trainers, friendships and rivalries with other fighters, and interactions with spectators created intricate social networks. Some gladiators earned privileges, modest wealth, or even patrons who protected and promoted them. These relationships highlight the multifaceted existence of gladiators, part athlete, part performer, part celebrity, navigating social hierarchies, danger, and opportunity. Remarkably, even in death, gladiators could influence culture. Inscriptions on tombstones, commemorative mosaics, and literary accounts preserve their stories. Their exploits were celebrated, morphologized, and adapted to serve moral, cultural, or entertainment purposes. The fame of a gladiator was thus both immediate in the cheers of the arena, and enduring in the historical record and cultural memory. In essence, famous gladiators illustrate the extremes of human experience, the interplay of skill, courage, fame, danger, and mortality. They were products of rigorous training, disciplined preparation, and extraordinary circumstance, yet their personalities and choices created legends that transcended time. From Spartacus' audacious rebellion to Flamma's repeated triumphs, from the rare female gladiators to countless nameless fighters whose names survive in inscriptions, the world of celebrated gladiators offers a window into the drama, spectacle, and human complexity of ancient Rome. Ultimately, these stories remind us why gladiators captivate our imagination. They represent courage and ingenuity in the face of overwhelming danger, the allure of fame and recognition, and the tragic yet compelling reality of lives lived under extreme pressure. Their stories are a testament to human resilience, ambition, and the timeless fascination with those who confront mortality head-on, while performing feats that inspire awe and admiration. Picture the Colosseum on a sunny Roman afternoon. Tens of thousands of citizens crowd the stands, voices rising in anticipation, banners fluttering in the wind. The air is thick with dust, sweat, and the smell of animals, lions, tigers, and other exotic beasts brought for entertainment. This is more than a battleground. It is a theater, a social stage, and a political instrument, all rolled into one. The arena was the heartbeat of Roman spectacle, where blood, bravery, and politics intertwined. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering and design. Amphitheaters across the empire, from the Colosseum in Rome to smaller venues in provincial towns, were carefully constructed to accommodate massive audiences and ensure visibility for all. The floor, typically sand-covered, absorbed blood and provided traction for combatants and animals alike. Beneath the stage were intricate systems of trapdoors, lifts, and cages, allowing sudden appearances of gladiators, wild beasts, and scenery, adding surprise and drama. Every detail was orchestrated to maximize spectacle and maintain the illusion of controlled chaos. Spectators came not merely for entertainment, but for social participation. Their reactions, cheers, jeers, gestures, and shouts could influence outcomes. Life or death might hinge on a thumb's position, a signal of approval or condemnation. The audience was both judge and jury, and gladiators had to master the art of performance as much as the art of combat. Winning favor required skill, timing, and sometimes charisma. A dramatic maneuver or courageous display could sway public opinion in a critical moment. The games themselves were complex events. They were rarely just single combats. Typical spectacles included sequences of fights, sometimes pitting different classes of gladiators against one another, interspersed with Venetians' hunts of exotic animals and executions of condemned criminals. These multifaceted programs could last an entire day, or even several, with the goal of thrilling audiences, demonstrating imperial generosity, and reinforcing societal norms. Variety was key. A mix of combat styles, narrative arcs, and suspenseful confrontations kept the crowd engaged. Political messaging was central to the spectacle. Emperors and magistrates sponsored games to demonstrate power, wealth, and benevolence. Gladiatorial events were tools for propaganda, reinforcing Roman dominance, the emperor's authority, and the societal order. By orchestrating carefully timed displays, organizers showcased control over life and death, nature and man, foreigners and citizens alike. Gladiators, in this sense, were instruments of political theater, their lives and deaths conveying messages about courage, loyalty, and Roman supremacy. The arena was also a space of tension and contrast. It was simultaneously life-affirming and life-taking, disciplined and chaotic, heroic and tragic. Gladiators were celebrated for courage and skill, yet constantly reminded of mortality. Victory brought fame, while defeat brought humiliation or death. Spectators were complicit in this drama, participating in a ritualized expression of societal values, admiration for bravery, recognition of skill, and approval of state-sanctioned punishment. Animals added another dimension of spectacle. Lions, bears, elephants, and exotic creatures were imported from across the empire, demonstrating Rome's reach and the emperor's power. Venetians tested gladiators' bravery and skill, often in elaborate hunts or staged fights against animals. These events reinforced narratives of human dominance over nature, while heightening drama for the audience. The unpredictability of live animals also introduced genuine danger, demanding quick thinking and courage from participants. Gladiatorial combat itself was structured, yet maintained an element of suspense. While myth often portrays every fight as a desperate struggle to the death, most matches ended when one fighter yielded or was incapacitated. Death was spectacular, but not constant, because gladiators were investments. Survival, strategic retreat, and display of skill were as celebrated as lethal efficiency. The balance between realism and theater made the games both thrilling and sustainable as entertainment. The social composition of the audience also influenced the games. Citizens of various classes, patricians, plebeians, freedmen, and slaves shared the stands, each bringing distinct expectations and reactions. Emperors and politicians understood these dynamics, tailoring spectacles to appeal broadly while reinforcing hierarchical structures. Gladiators performed not only for the masses, but also under the scrutiny of the elite, their fame and reputation shaped by a complex interplay of social perception and political intent. Ritual and ceremony framed the arena experience. Opening parades, formal announcements, and symbolic gestures punctuated fights, transforming the event into more than raw combat. Gladiators were presented as both entertainers and ritual participants, their actions imbued with meaning beyond personal survival. These ceremonies emphasized order, hierarchy, and narrative clarity, allowing spectators to interpret and emotionally invest in the unfolding drama. The psychological dimension of the arena was profound. Gladiators needed extraordinary focus, composure, and strategic thinking. They navigated a charged environment of noise, distraction, and expectation, facing both human and animal opponents. Success depended on anticipating moves, exploiting weaknesses, and maintaining situational awareness under extreme stress. Spectacle and survival were inseparable. The performance of courage was as critical as its reality. Finally, the arena's legacy extends beyond Rome. Its cultural imprint persists in literature, art, film, and modern sports. The interplay of skill, drama, and public engagement established a template for spectacle that resonates today. Understanding the arena's function, combining entertainment, political messaging, social hierarchy, and ritual, offers insight into the enduring fascination with gladiators and their world. In conclusion, the arena was more than sand and stone. It was a stage of life and death, strategy and spectacle, courage and politics. Gladiators performed in a complex system that demanded skill, bravery, and psychological resilience, captivating audiences while reinforcing societal norms. Blood, strategy, and spectacle intertwined to create an environment where heroism, tragedy, and political messaging coexisted. This understanding deepens our appreciation of the gladiator's role, just as a fighter, but as a performer, symbol, and participant in one of history's most extraordinary social spectacles. When we imagine gladiators, the stereotypical image is of a muscular man in armor wielding a sword. Yet history tells a far more diverse story. Women fought in the arena, and so did exotic participants rarely seen, highly dangerous, and often deliberately designed to astonish the Roman audience. These fighters expanded the spectacle of the games, challenging social norms, showcasing imperial power, and adding unpredictable excitement. Women gladiators, or gladiatresses, were much rarer than men, but their presence was documented in inscriptions, mosaics, and historical accounts. They fought in public, often during special events, and sometimes against other women or even men. The motivations for female participation varied. Some were slaves or condemned criminals. Others might have volunteered seeking fame, money, or a taste of the adrenaline and spectacle that the arena offered. Their rarity enhanced their appeal. Spectators were thrilled by the novelty, astonished by their courage, and drawn to the defiance of conventional gender roles. Training for female gladiators mirrored that of their male counterparts. They were taught weapon handling, combat strategy, and arena tactics, though sometimes with modified equipment and fighting styles. Surviving records hint at the same rigor, discipline, and danger that characterized the life of any gladiator. Despite the spectacle, these women faced extraordinary social and physical challenges. Engaging in combat as a woman in a male-dominated culture magnified the risks and the potential rewards, making each battle a high-stakes performance of both skill and identity. Exotic fighters took the arena to an entirely different level. Rome imported combatants from distant lands, showcasing warriors with unfamiliar styles, weapons, or fighting techniques. The purpose was twofold: to entertain and to display the empire's reach. Spectators marveled at unfamiliar combat styles, the audacity of foreign fighters, and the danger inherent in unfamiliar weapons and tactics. These battles emphasized Rome's cultural dominance, while simultaneously thrilling audiences with novelty and unpredictability. Animal combat, or venations, further amplified the spectacle. Lions, leopards, elephants, crocodiles, and other exotic beasts were brought from across the empire. Gladiators, often specialized hunters or heavily trained fighters, were pitted against these creatures in carefully staged fights. Some animals were released into the arena to simulate chaos. Others were part of choreographed hunts with mock tactics. The unpredictability of live animals added genuine danger, requiring quick thinking, courage, and skill beyond what standard training could provide. Audience reactions were electric: fear, awe, and admiration combined into a collective, visceral experience. Exotic fighters and animals were not merely entertainment, they were political instruments. The display of foreign combatants and creatures demonstrated the empire's reach and control over distant lands. Importing fighters and animals from Africa, the Middle East, and beyond symbolized Rome's power to subdue and command the known world. Each fight was a microcosm of imperial ideology, skill, courage, and domination under the gaze of the populace. Female gladiators also carried political and social symbolism. Their participation blurred boundaries of gender, status, and expectation. In a society highly conscious of hierarchy and gender roles, women fighting in the arena could be both celebrated and mocked, admired and critiqued. Their performances were spectacles of courage and transgression, highlighting the performative nature of social norms. The presence of female combatants challenged audiences to reconcile admiration with societal expectations, adding complexity to the entertainment and cultural messaging of the games. The rarity and novelty of these participants heightened the stakes. For women, Surviving and excelling could lead to fame and reward, but failure was brutal and public. For exotic fighters, unfamiliarity with local techniques, equipment, and arena conditions increased mortality risk. Both were instrumental in creating memorable, dramatic events that elevated the games from mere combat to extraordinary spectacle. The unpredictability of outcome amplified audience engagement, emotional investment, and the enduring mythos of gladiatorial entertainment. Training, preparation, and psychological readiness were critical. Women and exotic fighters were not only learning physical skills, but also performing under intense social scrutiny. Every move, every dodge, every strike was observed, interpreted, and judged by thousands. Mental resilience was essential. The capacity to maintain composure under fear, surprise, and the potential of death defined the best performers. Exceptional fighters could turn their rarity into strategic advantage, exploiting novelty, unpredictability, and public fascination. The visual and symbolic aspects of these fights were carefully orchestrated. Clothing, armor, weapons, and entrances were designed to enhance drama. Women gladiators might wear distinct helmets, tunics, or lightly armored ensembles to emphasize agility and grace. Exotic fighters could wield unfamiliar weapons, wear distinctive garb, or enter with ceremonial fanfare. Presentation mattered as much as skill, blending martial effectiveness with theatrical flourish. These details reinforced the immersive spectacle, creating stories within the fight itself. Moreover, the interactions among fighters, spectators, and political authorities created layered social narratives. Female gladiators might inspire admiration or controversy. Exotic fighters represented distant lands under Roman control, and successful outcomes could elevate reputations for both individuals and sponsors. The arena functioned as a cultural mirror, reflecting societal values, ambitions, and anxieties, while amplifying the drama of human and animal confrontation. In essence, the inclusion of women and exotic participants added depth, tension, and symbolism to gladiatorial spectacle. Finally, the legacy of these fighters is profound. While male gladiators dominate historical narratives, evidence of female and exotic participants reminds us of the diversity, ingenuity, and social complexity of the games. Their performances challenged norms, expanded possibilities, and heightened spectacle. They added unpredictable elements that kept audiences engaged and ensured the enduring fascination with gladiatorial culture. In conclusion, women and exotic fighters enriched the arena beyond mere combat. They embodied novelty, transgression, and imperial reach. Their presence demanded skill, courage, and psychological resilience, creating unforgettable spectacles. These fighters remind us that the gladiatorial world was more complex and diverse than the standard image of male warriors with swords. By including women and exotic participants, Rome created performances that were simultaneously thrilling, symbolic, and politically charged, demonstrating power, celebrating skill, and captivating audiences in ways that continue to inspire fascination to this day. For centuries, the roar of the crowd, the clash of swords, and the spectacle of blood in Roman amphitheaters defined entertainment, social structure, and political authority. Yet, like all things in history, even the mighty gladiatorial games were not eternal. The decline of these contests was gradual, influenced by economic strain, political changes, religious transformation, and shifting social values. Understanding this decline sheds light on both the resilience and fragility of Rome's cultural institutions. Economic factors played a crucial role. Organizing gladiatorial games was expensive. Trainers, weapons, armor, Medical staff, animals, and infrastructure required significant investment. Emperors and magistrates often used games to curry favor with citizens, but over time, the financial burden became increasingly unsustainable. Economic crises, inflation, and competing priorities for funding reduced the frequency and scale of games. Lavish spectacles gave way to smaller events, and the economic viability of maintaining large numbers of professional gladiators diminished. Political changes also affected the fate of the games. During the early empire, emperors tightly controlled gladiatorial spectacles, using them to consolidate power, display wealth, and manipulate public opinion. As Rome's political stability wavered, the ability of leaders to sponsor large, elaborate games diminished. Civic unrest, military conflicts, and administrative challenges shifted focus away from entertainment toward survival and governance. Gladiatorial contests, once central to political strategy, became increasingly peripheral. Religious and moral transformations had a profound impact. Christianity, rising in influence during the late empire, opposed the brutality and spectacle of human bloodshed. Early Christian writers condemned the games as morally corrupt, emphasizing compassion, the sanctity of life, and the evils of public cruelty. As Christian influence grew, public tolerance for lethal spectacles waned. Emperors who embraced Christian principles began restricting or abolishing certain types of combat, gradually undermining the social and cultural foundations of the games. Social values shifted as well. The appetite for extreme violence, once a hallmark of Roman culture, softened under new ethical frameworks. Citizens began questioning the morality of watching human suffering for amusement. Gladiators, once celebrated as heroes, were increasingly viewed through a lens of pity or moral concern. The public's perception of heroism and entertainment evolved, creating a climate where large-scale, lethal spectacles were less socially acceptable. The human cost of gladiatorial combat contributed to its decline. Despite medical advances and structured training, the games remained dangerous and often fatal. As moral scrutiny increased, the practice of killing for entertainment became increasingly indefensible. The paradox of valuing life to preserve investment while simultaneously promoting death for spectacle became harder to reconcile in a society undergoing ethical transformation. The decline was also geographic and institutional. Smaller towns, unable to fund or organize large-scale games, reduced their frequency. The centralized infrastructure of the Colosseum and other major amphitheaters could not compensate for declining provincial participation. Gladiator schools, or ludi, faced challenges maintaining enrollment and quality as opportunities dwindled. The economic and social ecosystem that supported gladiatorial combat weakened, leading to fewer trained fighters and less compelling spectacles. Famous gladiators, once symbols of courage, skill, and social negotiation, gradually faded from public memory. Legends like Spartacus remained in historical texts, but the living culture of the game's crowds, cheers, and immediate fame eroded. Fighters found fewer opportunities to earn prestige, financial reward, or freedom through combat. The collapse of the institutional and cultural framework led to a gradual disappearance of the professional gladiator class. Legislation reflected and reinforced this decline. Imperial edicts increasingly restricted the use of gladiators, reduced the frequency of games, or limited the types of contests. Authorities also shifted resources to military, civic, or religious projects, further marginalizing gladiatorial culture. The interplay of law, economy, and social values created conditions where lethal spectacle was no longer sustainable or desirable. Yet the decline did not erase the cultural impact. Gladiatorial games left an indelible mark on Roman identity, architecture, literature, and collective imagination. Amphitheaters became historical monuments. Inscriptions and mosaics preserved memory, and literary accounts transmitted stories of courage, tragedy, and spectacle. Even as live combat disappeared, the myths, narratives, and cultural fascination persisted, influencing subsequent generations and societies. The decline also illustrates broader patterns in history, how cultural practices rise, evolve, and fade under the influence of economics, politics, ethics, and social change. The trajectory of gladiatorial games demonstrates the complex interplay of human appetite for spectacle, ethical evolution, institutional support, and individual agency. Gladiators, once central to public life, became symbols of a vanished era, their stories preserved in memory, myth, and material culture rather than in living performance. In conclusion, the decline of gladiatorial games was neither sudden nor simple. Economic pressures, political instability, moral transformation, and social evolution combined to render the spectacles unsustainable. Gladiators, once celebrated and feared, became historical figures. Arenas, once sites of blood and drama, became monuments to memory. Yet the fascination with these fighters endures, reminding us of the complexities of culture, morality, and human entertainment. The fall of the games marks both an end and a legacy, a cautionary tale about the intersection of spectacle, ethics, and societal change. When the final echoes of the crowd faded in the ancient amphitheaters, the gladiators' swords were sheathed, and the sands of the arena were swept clean. Their story did not end. The legacy of these warriors continues to resonate across millennia, shaping our ideas of courage, spectacle, and heroism. From literature and film to sports and popular culture, the influence of gladiators is profound and enduring. Perhaps the most immediate legacy is in the arena of storytelling. Gladiators became archetypes in literature and myth, symbols of courage, skill, and defiance. Roman historians like Plutarch and Suetonius documented their feats, dramatizing battles, personal rivalries, and acts of bravery. These accounts blended fact and narrative flair, creating enduring legends. The story of Spartacus, for example, transcends his historical rebellion to become a universal tale of resistance against oppression, inspiring writers, playwrights, and eventually filmmakers centuries later. Cinema has amplified the gladiatorial legacy dramatically. Epic films like Spartacus and Gladiator have introduced modern audiences to the spectacle, heroism, and drama of the ancient arena, while Hollywood often prioritizes drama over historical accuracy. These portrayals capture the psychological and emotional intensity of gladiatorial combat. They emphasize courage under pressure, moral dilemmas, and the interplay of individual skill and societal expectation. Modern viewers experience the thrill, fear, and admiration once felt by Roman audiences, albeit in a fictionalized context. Sports culture also draws heavily from the gladiatorial archetype. Athletes are celebrated for strength, skill, and endurance qualities long admired in gladiators. Terms like arena, combat, and gladiator spirit appear in modern commentary, marketing, and branding. Mixed martial arts, professional wrestling, and contact sports evoke parallels to gladiatorial combat, physical skill, strategy, performance, and public engagement. Competitors perform under intense pressure, their victories and losses observed by a passionate audience, echoing ancient rituals of spectacle and competition. Beyond entertainment, the gladiator archetype influences societal psychology. The fascination with courage, skill, and risk-taking persists across cultures. Gladiators embody ideals of bravery in the face of overwhelming odds, strategic thinking under pressure, and resilience in adversity. This archetype shapes literature, motivational narratives, and even corporate culture, where the gladiator mindset is invoked metaphorically to inspire focus, perseverance, and competitive excellence. Historical scholarship has also preserved and interpreted their legacy. Archaeological findings, inscriptions, mosaics, and amphitheater ruins provide insights into the realities of gladiatorial life, combat techniques, and social roles. Historians analyze these artifacts to reconstruct training methods, diets, equipment, and social dynamics. This research deepens understanding of the complexity, humanity, and ingenuity of gladiators, challenging simplistic or romanticized portrayals. It also highlights the tension between spectacle and exploitation, heroism and mortality. The symbolic power of gladiators extends to cultural commentary. They are used as metaphors for struggle, resilience, and societal pressures. Just as ancient spectators interpreted battles as reflections of courage and societal order, modern culture interprets the gladiator as a lens to explore human ambition, ethical dilemmas, and performance under stress. The archetype endures because it combines drama, morality, and human fascination with risk and reward. Visual arts, from Renaissance paintings to contemporary installations, celebrate gladiators as symbols of strength and heroism. Artists emphasize physical form, dynamic movement, and emotional intensity, drawing on both historical evidence and mythologized imagery. These depictions reinforce the gladiators' enduring presence in the collective imagination, shaping aesthetics, narratives, and cultural memory. Education and museums also preserve the gladiatorial legacy. Exhibitions of weapons, armor, and amphitheater reconstructions offer immersive experiences that illuminate ancient practices. Interactive displays allow audiences to engage with history, exploring the life of a gladiator through artifacts, simulations, and narrative storytelling. These experiences foster empathy, understanding, and fascination, bridging the gap between ancient spectacle and modern curiosity. Moreover, the philosophical and ethical dimensions of gladiatorial culture remain relevant. Gladiators force reflection on morality, entertainment, and human nature. The tension between fascination with violence and ethical concern resonates in contemporary debates over media, sports, and spectacle. By examining the gladiatorial past, modern society can explore the dynamics of power, performance, and audience complicity, enriching ethical and cultural discourse. In literature, modern authors continue to draw inspiration from gladiatorial stories, blending historical fiction with psychological insight. Novels explore the inner lives of fighters, their relationships, fears, and ambitions. These narratives humanize gladiators, transforming them from mere entertainers into complex characters navigating extreme circumstances. Readers are invited to consider resilience, identity, and the meaning of courage in contexts that parallel contemporary human experience. Finally, the enduring fascination with gladiators illustrates the universal appeal of heroism and spectacle. From the sands of ancient arenas to the pages of books, the screens of cinemas, and the mats of sports arenas, the archetype resonates because it embodies extremes, skill and danger, courage and mortality, discipline and improvisation. Gladiators captivate not only because of physical prowess, but because they navigate human dilemmas at the most intense level, reflecting values, fears, and aspirations that transcend time. In conclusion, the legacy of gladiators is multifaceted and profound. They shape storytelling, sports culture, visual arts, philosophy, and social imagination. Their archetype courageous, skilled, and disciplined individuals confronting extreme challenges continues to inspire and resonate. Gladiators remind us of the enduring human fascination with spectacle, risk, and resilience. Their influence is a testament to the power of narrative, performance, and cultural memory, bridging ancient Rome with contemporary society in ways both profound and enduring. From the sands of the Colosseum to the arenas of cinema, literature, and sport, the spirit of the gladiator lives on, an eternal symbol of courage, skill, and human drama.